The boardroom exploded into chaos. Papers flew, executives shouted, and security lunged toward the quiet man standing at the head of the table. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not during a merger vote. Not in a janitor's uniform. "Get this janitor out of here," one VP barked, slamming his fist on the table. But the man didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even blink. He simply placed a worn leather folder on the polished mahogany desk and opened it. Inside were documents, photos, evidence, enough to bury everyone in the room. The room went cold. A whisper sliced through the silence like a blade. "That's not a janitor." Heads turned. "That's the CEO's son." And in that instant, every powerful man in that room realized they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. His name was Michael Grant, 40 years old, 6 feet tall, black, quiet, invisible. At least, that's how the office saw him. He worked nights, always the first in, last out. No chatter, no complaints. Just silent work, polished floors, wiped windows, empty trash. To most, he was just a shadow that moved through the halls. A brown uniform, a mop, a man who blended into the background of billion-dollar deals. And yet, he noticed everything. Which board members left late and drunk, which executives whispered behind closed doors, which assistants cried alone in stairwells. He saw it all and remembered it all. "Don't forget the trash, janitor," one young VP sneered one night, tossing a half-eaten sandwich at his feet. Michael didn't flinch, didn't speak. He simply smiled, not out of weakness, but because he knew something the VP didn't. He was never just a janitor. He was a storm they couldn't see coming. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Michael walked 5 blocks in the rain to a quiet cemetery, row 17. Plot 6. The grave was small, simple, clean. Mariah Grant, beloved mother, brilliant woman, unforgotten. He knelt down, pulled off his gloves, and traced the name with his fingertips. "Hey, Ma," he whispered, a single rose in hand, a man with an empire in his blood. "You once told me, don't chase revenge, son. Let it walk into your hands." He looked up at the cloudy sky. "It's walking, Ma, right toward me." And then he stood, a janitor by uniform, but something far more dangerous behind the eyes, because the office had no idea. They weren't being cleaned. They were being studied. It started small. A broken printer in the HR wing. No IT available. The office panicked. Michael walked by, paused, opened the panel, and fixed it in under a minute. How did you know how to do that?" a junior staffer asked, blinking. Michael didn't answer, just wiped the ink from his fingers and moved on. Next week, it was the CEO's projector, glitching right before a billion-dollar investor pitch. Michael stepped in silently, pressed 3 buttons, rewired a loose cable, and walked out just before the CEO entered. No one even saw him. He moved through the halls like a ghost who could hear wires hum and secrets breathe. And people started whispering. Is it just me, or does that janitor know too much? I saw him reading a financial report. He was just standing there, like he understood all of it. He gives me the creeps, man. Like he's listening. Always listening. They were right. Michael had a notebook. Small, black leather. Always tucked in his inner coat pocket. He never wrote in it around others. Only when no one was looking. But he wrote constantly. Numbers, names, times, patterns, conversations. A chart of the company's entire nervous system, being built in silence, one hallway at a time. One night, an executive accidentally dropped a document labeled confidential, off-book bonuses Q4. Michael picked it up, scanned it once, didn't say a word, didn't hand it back. He just folded it neatly, slid it under the executive's office door, and made a note in his book, because Michael wasn't just cleaning up messes. He was mapping them, and every whisper, every document, every offhand insult was just one more clue in the puzzle he was about to solve. No one realized the janitor wasn't watching the building. He was watching them. At the top of the building sat Daniel Mercer, the man everyone called the wolf in a suit. Billionaire, ruthless, white-haired perfectionist with steel-gray eyes and a voice that could freeze boiling water. He didn't ask questions. He gave orders. And he didn't believe in second chances. Mercer believed the world was divided into two kinds of people, those who led and those who served. And he reminded everyone of that, daily. "You want respect?" he once told a junior exec. "Buy yourself a mirror." He ran Mercer Dynamics like a battlefield. Deadlines were weapons. Fear was strategy. And compassion? That was weakness. Something for soft people with small paychecks. He didn't learn janitors' names. Didn't see cafeteria staff. Didn't nod at security guards. And he never spoke to Michael. Not once. Even when they passed in the hallway, Mercer's eyes never stopped moving, past him, through him, as if Michael didn't exist. "People like janitors," he once said during a board meeting, "stay where they belong, in the background." But what Daniel Mercer didn't know was that his background was about to speak. Flashback, 20 years earlier, a hotel lobby, late night, rain tapping on glass. A young Daniel Mercer, not yet CEO, but already dangerous, sipping whiskey at a company gala. She walked in like music. Black, brilliant, laughed like velvet. Mariah Grant, a guest speaker, business ethics professor from Howard University. She challenged him, mocked him, called him arrogant to his face, and smiled while doing it. They spent 3 days talking, one night together, and then she disappeared. 6 weeks later, a letter arrived. "I'm pregnant. Don't worry. I won't ask for anything, but he will know who you are." Daniel never responded. He buried the letter, buried the memory, and buried the truth. No one ever saw the child. No one ever asked, because Daniel Mercer had already decided that child, whoever he was, didn't exist. But 20 years later, that child had just cleaned his office, and the truth he thought he'd buried, it was now sweeping the floor beneath his feet. The announcement came on a Tuesday. An email, cold, clinical, one line, effective immediately, cost reduction layoffs to begin with janitorial, cafeteria, and security departments. No names, no thanks, just a list of badge numbers. That afternoon, dozens of low-wage workers stood in the back of conference room B. Stunned, some crying, some too tired to even protest. Executives in suits stood at the front, avoiding eye contact. Michael stood against the wall, silent as always, but his jaw was tight, and his eyes were burning. A young cafeteria woman whispered, "I can't afford rent without this job." A guard said, "I've worked here 18 years, and that's it? No goodbye." Then came the line that broke him. One VP chuckled, "They'll find other brooms. People like this are replaceable." Michael stepped forward, slowly, calmly, but with fire behind his voice. "Without us," he said, "your floors collapse." The room went still. Without the people who come before dawn and leave after midnight, this company is just an empty shelf full of arrogant noise. An executive turned, furious. "You don't speak in this room," he snapped. "You clean it." Michael didn't blink. Maybe that's why it's so dirty. Murmurs rose. Some workers held back stunned smiles. The executives, outraged. "Get him out of here," someone barked. "You're done," said another. "Pack your things, janitor." Michael looked around, at the terrified eyes of the cafeteria team, the trembling hands of the elderly security guard, the exhausted woman who worked double shifts to feed her kids. Then he turned to the executive who fired him and said, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." And he walked out, slow, straight-backed, like a man who had just lit a fuse. Michael didn't argue. He didn't protest. He simply walked out of the conference room, past the stunned staff, and down the polished hallway one last time. As he passed the executive assistant's desk, he paused, reached into his janitor's coat, and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. "Give this to Mr. Mercer," he said softly. "Right away?" she asked, confused. Michael looked her dead in the eye. "No, tomorrow morning, right before the board meeting." Then he turned and walked out the doors of Mercer Dynamics for the last time, or so they thought. The next morning, Daniel Mercer arrived at exactly 8:01 a.m., as he always did. He hated being early. It made him look eager. He hated being late. It made him look weak. His assistant handed him the envelope. There was no name, she said, but he said it was for you. Inside the envelope was a single note. Read this alone. And below it, a thick USB drive and a list of file names. Executive bonus fraud, Q1, Q4, whistleblower suppression emails, insider trades, Mercer, Downs, Holloway, unpaid overtime lawsuits. Barry Doc's Mercer's face went pale. He opened his laptop, inserted the drive. What he saw unraveled him. Recordings, internal emails, spreadsheets with deleted tabs, even boardroom video clips, security camera downloads showing illegal votes, hidden handshakes, off-record deals. And at the center of every folder was a watermark burned onto every file. Collected by MG, his hands trembled, his jaw clenched, his reflection in the laptop screen stared back. A man about to lose everything. Get the board in here, he snapped. Right now. Within minutes, the company's most powerful men and women were locked inside the executive boardroom. No agenda, no coffee, no script. Only one chair sat empty at the head of the table. That was about to change. Because the janitor they fired, he wasn't done cleaning yet. The boardroom buzzed with disbelief. Executives flipped through pages of damning documents. One CFO had turned white as a sheet. Another had already texted his lawyer. At the head of the table, Daniel Mercer sat in silence, shoulders tense, lips pressed in a tight line. He hadn't spoken in 5 full minutes. The envelope, the files, the watermark, MG, and then the doors opened. Footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Michael entered. No uniform, no mop, just a black dress shirt, dark jeans, and a quiet fire in his eyes. Gasps swept the room. Security stepped forward, let him speak. Mercer barked. Michael didn't sit. He placed a second envelope on the table. This one's for public release, he said, unless you want to explain the private one yourselves. A long silence followed. Then, from the corner of the room, the company's oldest secretary, a woman named Eleanor, who had worked with Mercer for over 30 years, leaned forward and stared hard at Michael. Her voice cracked. He looks just like her. Every head turned toward her. Who? Someone whispered. Eleanor's eyes never left Michael's face. Mariah, that woman from D.C. The Professor Mercer used to sneak away to meet. She looked at Mercer. You told us it was nothing. Daniel Mercer's eyes finally locked with Michael's, truly seeing him for the first time. Same jawline, same stare, same fire. His hands began to tremble. No, he whispered. It can't be. Michael stepped forward, voice calm but heavy with decades of silence. I didn't come for revenge, he said. I came to remind you of who you left behind. The room fell silent. Mercer's lips parted. His voice caught in his throat. Michael nodded. Your son. The word hit harder than any lawsuit. The most powerful man in the company had just been undone by the child he denied. And the janitor they ignored was the heir they never saw coming. No one moved. No one breathed. Michael's words hung in the air like a silent explosion. Your son. The men and women who had just tried to erase him from the company now stared like ghosts watching the past rise from a grave. Daniel Mercer looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. What do you want? He asked quietly. Michael tilted his head, then slid a third envelope across the table. This one was thick. Legal. Numbered pages. Signatures. Mariah Grant never sold her shares, Michael said. She held 26% of Mercer Dynamics when she died, and in her will she passed every single share to me. Mercer's breath caught. That's impossible. Those shares were inactive. No, Michael cut in. You just ignored them. Like you ignored her. Like you ignored me. The general counsel quickly flipped through the documents. Seal. Signature. Notarized. It was real. Michael's voice dropped, calm as thunder. So legally, I now own 26% of this company. Murmurs rippled through the boardroom. Several board members looked at each other, doing math in their heads. With 26% and the public scandal pending, he could vote out the CEO. He could restructure the board. He could end all of them. Michael stepped forward, placing both hands on the table. The janitor you ignored, he let the silence stretch, is now your boss. And just like that, a man they wouldn't look in the eye yesterday had just become the most powerful person in the room, not because he shouted, not because he threatened, but because he waited. He watched. And when the moment came, he walked into the front door, holding everything they thought he'd never touch. The truth, the power, and their future. Daniel Mercer sat back down, not because he wanted to, but because his legs couldn't hold him anymore. His mouth opened, but the words came out broken. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked. His voice, the same voice that once barked orders and moved millions, now cracked like old wood. Michael took a breath, and for the first time, he didn't sound like a janitor. He sounded like a man who had waited his whole life for this moment. "Because I wanted you to see me first," he said, "and you never did." Mercer blinked hard. His face was pale. His hands trembled. "I didn't know. I didn't..." Michael stepped back, turning to the board. "I'm not here to destroy this company," he said. "I'm here to clean it, for real this time." He placed a second list on the table. It had names. All the staff laid off without notice. Reinstate every one of them, with back pay, effective immediately. Then he slid another list forward. Executives, the ones who mocked staff, stole bonuses, buried lawsuits. These people, Michael said, no longer represent the values of this company. No one argued, not one word, because they all knew he had receipts. Finally, he pulled out a final document, a plaque design, a nameplate, the Mariah Grant Foundation for Employee Equity and Inclusion, to be headquartered on the 42nd floor. "My mother believed in dignity," Michael said quietly. "She gave her life to education, and she died with nothing, because she never sold her soul for status." He turned toward Mercer. "But you did." Mercer lowered his head, crushed not by power, but by the weight of his own reflection. Michael looked at the board one last time. "This company will change, from the inside out, and it starts now." And then he walked out of the room, not like a man who won, but like a man who had finally been seen. The top floor office looked the same, but everything had changed. The name on the glass door now read, Michael Grant, Chief Executive Officer. He didn't sit behind the desk much. He preferred walking the halls, talking to people, asking their names. But one thing in the office stood out. Framed behind glass, mounted on the back wall, his old janitor's uniform. Pressed, cleaned, preserved. Underneath, a plaque. "They thought they knew me." Michael would sometimes stare at it during meetings, not out of pride, but as a reminder where he came from and where the world tried to keep him. Within weeks, everything began to shift. Michael launched a new hiring initiative. Jobs for formerly incarcerated workers, paid internships for high schoolers from underserved communities, mental health coverage for janitorial, food service, and night shift teams mandatory leadership workshops on bias, humility, and equity. One executive grumbled, "This isn't how business works." Michael replied calmly, "Then it's time we change the definition of business." And change it did. By Q3, profits had risen 14%. Employee turnover dropped to record lows. Investors began praising the Grant model. Leadership through lived experience. News stories exploded. From mop to management, the janitor who took the corner office, CEO Michael Grant rewrites corporate America, hashtag the janitor boss trends worldwide. And through it all, Michael never gave interviews, never gloated, never looked back, because he understood something the board never did. You don't need to raise your voice or rise. You just need to know exactly who you are and wait for the world to catch up. The sky was overcast. Wind whispered through the trees as Michael stood at plot 6, row 17, the grave he'd visited in silence for years. But this time, he wasn't wearing a janitor's coat. This time, he wore a charcoal gray suit. In his hand, his mother's original company badge, faded but untouched. In his pocket, his own freshly printed, glinting with gold. CEO, Mercer Dynamics. He knelt down slowly and placed both badges side by side, pressing them gently into the earth. His fingers trembled, but his voice was steady. You were right, Ma. I didn't have to chase revenge. I just had to be patient enough for justice to catch up. He stood, brushed the dust from his knees, and smiled a quiet, grateful smile. Then the voiceover came in deep, warm, final. Sometimes justice doesn't scream. It whispers. Through brooms. Through silence. Through men the world refuses to see. They called him a janitor, but he was always something more. He just waited for them to finally look. Fade to black. Soft piano music. The uniform. The badge. The name. Michael Grant. CO. Son. Janitor. Legend.